It's January 25th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with North Korea's test firing of its new strategic cruise missiles. The North says it has test fired a new Bulhwasar 331 strategic cruise missile for the first time on Wednesday. The regime claims the test fire is part of the process of constantly updating the regime's weapon system. Russia has accused Ukraine's military of shooting down a plane which it says was carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war. There were no survivors, and Ukraine was careful in response to the allegations, saying Russian aircraft in the area are legitimate targets. South Korea's economy in 2023 managed to meet its target growth of 1.4%. But the growth in exports, private consumption, and government consumption didn't meet expectations. North Korea claims that what it fired into the wet sea on Wednesday was a new type strategic cruise missile. According to Pyongyang state-run media a few hours ago, the North conducted the first test launch of its newly developed cruise missile named Bulhwasar 331, or Fire Arrow in Korean. The report also said it's an ongoing process of upgrading the weapon system and a regular and obligatory activity for its missile and defense science agencies. But no details were revealed regarding the launch site, flight time, altitude, or trajectory. And these cruise missiles do not violate the UN Security Council resolutions as the regime's ballistic missile launches do. But that also doesn't mean the cruise missile launches can be legitimized. Our North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil explains.
Another missile provocation by Pyongyang. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said North Korea fired multiple cruise missiles at around 7 a.m. on Wednesday into its waters in the West Sea. It added that the military had increased surveillance activities and was closely coordinating with the U.S. It's been 10 days since Pyongyang last carried out a missile provocation. On January 14th, the regime claimed it had successfully launched a hypersonic solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile. Experts say cruise missiles can fly very low and are harder to detect as they're beneath radar coverage. Cruise missiles can also hit targets precisely from long range, which is why North Korea is developing them as a military option. But since they're slow, they can be shot down if detected. Ballistic missiles, on the other hand, are powered initially by a rocket and because of their high speed are extremely difficult to shoot down. It's for these reasons the UN Security Council has only banned North Korean ballistic missile launches. But the experts say North Korea's cruise missiles can pose just as much of a threat.
It's not a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, but last year, when North Korea unveiled its tactical Hwasong-31 nuclear warhead, it claimed the weapon could be carried on a cruise missile, so they still pose a great threat.
Another expert, a former commander of South Korea's special forces, said military provocations by Pyongyang pose a threat to not only South Korea, but to the world.
North Korea is known for its very belligerent language, and because North Korea exports these weapons, it has worldwide implications.
General Chun added that the South Korean military will remain vigilant at all times. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
In the meantime, North Korea continued to mess around with illegal cyber activities in 2023. In fact, carrying out the most it's ever done. This signals a red flag, especially for South Korean authorities ahead of the April general election. Shin Yeon reports.
Despite measures from the international society to prevent further cyber attacks, 2023 was the most active year for North Korean-linked hackers. According to Chainalysis, an American blockchain analysis firm, 20 cryptocurrency platform attacks have been traced back to North Korea, which is the highest number of attacks since 2016 when data was first compiled. The total attacks from last year account for approximately $1 billion worth of crypto assets. The number of cyber attacks started to increase from 2020 as North Korean-affiliated groups such as Kim Suk-hee and the Lazarus Group targeted different cryptocurrency platforms and exploited decentralized finance protocols. North Korean attackers have allegedly stolen a whopping amount of cryptocurrency to fund nuclear programs, though the regime denies any claims of hacking. Pyongyang faces multiple UN sanctions as well as those from the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control and South Korean authorities to limit illicitly obtained and laundered funds. This comes as South Korea's intelligence agency reported on Wednesday that 80% of attempts to hack South Korea's public institutions last year were attributed to North Korean-related hacker groups. Mostly to fund its weapons program, South Korea's National Intelligence Agency predicts that Pyongyang's hacking attempts and dissemination of fake news are expected to be more frequent throughout this year as election season approaches both in Washington and Seoul. The NIS has pledged to strengthen measures to respond to cyber attacks by creating a task force team and establishing heightened responses. Yoon, Arirang News.
Russia says Ukraine shot down a Russian military plane on Wednesday, killing all 74 people on board, including Ukrainian prisoners of war being transported for a prisoner swap. Lee Seung-jae has more.
At around 11 a.m. Wednesday local time, a Russian military plane crashed in the Russian border city of Belgorod. Shortly after the crash, Russia accused Ukraine of shooting down the Ilyushin 76 cargo plane, saying that all 74 people on board were killed, including 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war who were being transported for a prisoner swap. Moscow says it was a terrorist attack by Ukraine and claimed that a missile fired by Ukraine was detected on radar.
The plane was downed by the Ukrainian armed forces from Liptsy village in Kharkiv region using an anti-aircraft missile system. The radar facilities of the Russian aerospace forces observed the launch of 2 Ukrainian missiles.
Ukraine was careful in its response to Russia's accusation. Its military command said it regarded Russian military aircraft approaching Belgorod as legitimate targets, but stopped short of acknowledging that it had fired at the plane. It added that it has seen an increased intensity of shelling by Russia, which had correlated with an increase in the number of military transport aircraft that have recently been heading to the Belgorod airfield. POWs from both sides were scheduled to be swapped at the border checkpoint. The chairman of Russia's lower house of parliament's defense committee claimed that Ukrainian forces fired 3 missiles to prevent a prisoner exchange. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Wednesday that he had requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting following the crash. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The International Court of Justice said Wednesday that it will announce whether it will order emergency measures against Israel after South Africa filed a case accusing Israel of genocide against the people of Gaza. The UN's top court said that its 17-judge panel will announce its response on Friday, with the South African foreign minister on hand as the ICJ makes its decision. However, the ICJ will not deal with the issue of genocide, but will look at possible emergency measures to restrain Israel's actions. This comes as South Africa earlier this month called on the World Court to order an emergency suspension of Israel's military offensive in Gaza. South Korea's economy grew at its forecasted pace in 2023. Data from the Bank of Korea released on Thursday shows South Korea's real GDP grew 1.4% last year, in line with the central bank's forecast. But the growth is nearly half that of an on-year growth recorded in 2022 and the lowest seen in 3 years. And in the fourth quarter last year, South Korea's economy grew 0.6% on quarter, posting quarterly growth for the 4th consecutive quarter, mainly thanks to a recovery in the export sector. Now, let's delve deeper into the latest figures with Professor Kim Se-won this morning. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. South Korea's economy, like I mentioned, grew 1.4% last year in 2023. Professor Kim, is this something you saw coming or a complete surprise?
Well, I would say it is something between a disappointment and a good surprise. Last year, Korean economy was weaker than the previous year, 2022, mostly due to declining domestic expenditures in retail sales and facility investment. But export surged in the last quarter of last year, which lessened the decline of Korean economy. So domestic expenditure was disappointing, but export was a good surprise.
So poor domestic consumption, but exports were stronger than you thought. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
All right, then still the growth of exports and private consumption didn't quite meet expectations. Well, at least the private consumption, like you mentioned. Do you think poor domestic spending will actually pick up this year in the new year, though?
Well, as we talked about, domestic expenditure was weak last year. In addition, Korean export decreased 7.4% on year in 2023. But this year's domestic consumption is expected to be weaker than last year's because domestic consumption is pretty much limited due to huge household debt and high interest rate. Therefore, this year's domestic consumption, along with capital investment by corporations, will be weaker than last year.
All right, poor domestic consumption, hopefully that will pick up this year. But some analysts are worried that growth below 2% for a second straight year might happen for the very first time this year. Professor Kim, why such a pessimistic view on this?
As of beginning of 2024, global economy is not fully recovered from COVID pandemic, and economic uncertainties are rising related to geopolitical crisis in Ukraine and Palestine. This is actually pretty much negative scenario to Korean economy because Korean economy is one of the most foreign dependent economies in the whole world. Also, Chinese economy for this year is expected to experience more serious downturn this year. China's GDP growth could slow to 4.6% in 2024 from 5.4% growth of last year because of continued weakness in China's property sector and subdued external demand. Since China is still #1 trading partner of Korea, Korean economy's growth will be limited along with China's slowdown.
Definitely. South Korea's economy is heavily reliant on China, especially when it comes to economy. Now, the goal this year is to achieve the over 2% growth. Now, 2.1% to be exact economic growth this year. How achievable is that? I mean, why is reaching 2% growth so important?
I'm personally positive in gaining over 2% growth for this year. As we talked about, the domestic expenditures of consumption and investment are expected to be worse than last year. So the remaining momentum drives Korean economy would be a stronger export. By industry sector, outbound shipments of automobiles, machinery, home appliances, and displays products will continue to be solid this year. If these export items growth maintains over 2 digits on-year growth, that would be a positive sign of gaining over 2% growth for this year. And Korea's #1 export item of chip market is highly expected to be recovered from the first half of this year. And lastly, maintaining 2% level economic growth is important because the 2% is very close to Korea's potential growth, which utilizes all available resources of labor and capital.
Professor Kim, before I let you go, I want to quickly ask you, you said chip exports will do a better job in the first quarter of 2024. Where is this confidence coming from?
Well, according to the many surveys in global chip markets, market participants find that there is a stronger and solid demands for chips, particularly the memory chips produced by Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, thanks to the more developed months of the artificial intelligence and home appliances.
Definitely, lots of new gadgets as we saw at the CES in January. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
A 4-day work week sounds like such a dream work schedule for many workers around the world. But it's not just pie in the sky in South Korea, with firms starting to adopt a partial 4-day work week system. Our An Sung-jin has the story.
South Korea's largest steel manufacturer, POSCO, kicked off its new 4-day workweek system this week. An employee at the firm is looking forward to taking every second Friday off so that he can spend time with family.
If I have 3 days off, it'll give me enough time to go on long-distance trips. For my first Friday off next week, I'm planning to go to the hot springs with my family to relax.
This became possible with POSCO's new work policy, where employees get every other Friday off if they fulfill an average of 40 working hours across 2 weeks. By introducing a 4-day work week, the company expects to create an environment that is more worker-friendly.
I think it's a positive change to give employees enough time to spend on personal development, childcare, or to rest with the extra day. Having a flexible work system allows us to build a more family-friendly work environment and gives a better work-life balance.
One economics expert says that introducing a 4-day work week could boost worker productivity.
With fewer working days, work is less dispersed, which means that concentration increases and boosts labor productivity.
The 4-day work week has been branching out to different industries, predominantly around IT companies. Samsung Electronics gives 1 Friday off per month, and SK Telecom allows employees to take 2 Fridays off. Severance Hospital also began a 4-day work week for nurses. However, the same expert notes that not all companies will be able to use a 4-day work week.
Only companies that can make a profit from a 4-day work week can do it. So it's important to take into account the different characteristics of each industry to decide the working system accordingly.
Others raise concerns that reduced working days may lead to more stress and an intense schedule as the amount of work stays the same. The 5-day work week has been only placed in South Korea for 20 years. But these days, other countries such as those in North America and Europe have transitioned into a 4-day work week. Whether this will bring change in South Korea will be something to look out for. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Ji-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Argentina, where the country's largest labor union, the General Confederation of Labor, began a 12-hour strike in the capital, Buenos Aires, on Wednesday to protest new President Javier Milei's economic and labor reforms. The 12-hour strike began at noon local time on Wednesday, with tens of thousands of workers demonstrating in the capital and other cities across the country. The CGT coordinated the strike in response to Milei's 2 major reforms, a mega decree aimed at reducing the power of unions and deregulating Argentina's economy, and an omnibus bill that proposes extensive reforms for political, fiscal, social and administrative policy. Mass strikes limited the operation of banks, public services, transport, hospitals and businesses throughout the day. Aerolíneas Argentinas reportedly cancelled 267 flights as aeronautical unions joined the strike, affecting more than 17,000 travellers. British billionaire Joe Lewis in New York federal court on Wednesday pleaded guilty to securities fraud related to insider trading. Lewis, whose family trust owns the English Premier League football team Tottenham Hotspur, has admitted to sharing non-public information to friends and associates and apologized to a judge, commenting that he was embarrassed of his misconduct. The 86-year-old billionaire was accused last July by New York attorney Damian Williams of giving friends, including romantic partners, assistants, personal pilots, and friends inside information about companies in which he invested in. Lewis was charged with 16 counts of securities fraud and 3 counts of conspiracy by federal prosecutors. According to Forbes, the founder of investment firm Tavistock Group has a net worth of $6.2 billion. Lewis has been released on a $300 million bail using his luxury assets as security. According to the prosecutor's statement, Lewis and his company, Broad Bay Limited, will pay over $50 million in fines with a prison sentence between 18 and 24 months. Lewis's sentencing is scheduled for the 28th of March. Now to the breakthrough gene therapy that helped an 11-year-old deaf boy recover from his hearing. According to Dr. John Miller of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia on Wednesday, the patient, Aysam Dam, now has a mild to moderate hearing impairment after previously living his life in silence. Aysam, a Moroccan boy who lives with his family in Barcelona, Spain, traveled to Philadelphia to undergo the experimental treatment last September. The treatment, including surgery in October, involved the insertion of properly functioning otopharyngeal genes into the boy's inner ear. Aysam now says, "There is no sound that I don't like." And finally to Brazil, where indigenous Amazon leaders are promoting a reforestation program to restore degraded areas of the rainforest. According to Brazilian agricultural research agency Embrapa, on Wednesday, an online learning program called Sowing Forests on Indigenous Lands was launched to spread knowledge on how to collect, germinate, and store tree seeds to boost the Amazon recovery. The initiative was launched by Kayapo chief Raoni Metuktire, an environmental campaigner for the Amazon and chief almaer of the Surui people, with support from the French government.
Good morning. Extreme cold continues today with cold wave alerts in place for central parts of the country and Gyeongsang-Pukto province. Feels like temperatures in the capital are close to minus 13 degrees Celsius this morning. But at least afternoon highs are forecast to be a few degrees higher, but the biting winds will make it feel like below zero all day in Seoul. Meanwhile, the cold snap should ease off tomorrow afternoon. Athletes at the Youth Games in Gangwon-do are having a freezing start to the day. Pyeongchang nearing minus 20 degrees Celsius. Then highs will go up slightly higher than Wednesday under sunny skies. Afternoon highs will be 2 to 5 degrees higher in most places compared to yesterday. Seoul topping out at the freezing mark. Daegu at 4 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Sunny skies are expected except in the mountainous regions on Jeju and Ulleungdo and Dokdo, with more snow in the forecast. After this round of the cold snap comes to an end, we could say the coldest part of the season is over. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
강원 동계 청소년 올림픽 대회.
I definitely loved this movie and I loved how the main character saw himself in this junior band and he changed his mind from wanting to scam them in the beginning into wanting to help them and sympathizing with them.
나름대로 살아가는 삶 죽지 못해 무기
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey Mr. Cupid, who's lying? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. May news just for you. It's January 25th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And Choi Ji-hee. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Energy drinks may be helpful in the short term, giving you enough energy to get you through the day, but they can take a toll on your sleep patterns. That's according to a new study on university students in Norway. The study found that those who drink energy drinks daily slept about half an hour less each night compared to those who didn't drink energy drinks at all or had them occasionally. Moving on, Netflix has made a multi-billion-dollar deal to become the only global broadcaster of World Wrestling Entertainment from next year. The streaming giant agreed to a 10-year deal worth over $5 billion, ensuring WWE programs like Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. Pay-per-views like WrestleMania will also be available on the platform. This deal is by far the biggest investment Netflix has made in live sports. In less than 2 months' time, South Korean singer Chung Ju-young, who was at the center of the Burning Sun scandal that shook Korea back in 2019, will be released from prison. Chung was initially handed a 5-year sentence for sexually assaulting an intoxicated woman and illegally recording sexual videos and taking photos and sending them to fellow celebrities in a group chat. Ahead of his release, other celebrities who've been involved in the scandal are steadily trying to get back into media. That includes K-pop boy band Big Bang Seungri and FT Island's Choi Jong-hoon. Now, the public has been quick to react. Many have raised their eyebrows and said how it's too soon to see these celebrities back on TV and just sweep what they've done under the carpet. Now, here in the studio, what do you guys think? Do you remember the Burning Sun scandal that really shook up South Korea back in the year 2019? And do you think it's right that we put the past in the past now that it's been a few years now, and now that most of the involved have actually finished their prison sentence?
Well, I do clearly remember the whole situation, and absolutely not for them returning to the entertainment scene. I can't even believe that it's already been 5 years. And initially, I thought 5 years sentence was too short for the crimes they committed, and especially Chung Ju-young. And also, I think there are things that could be put in the past, but this case certainly isn't. And there are celebrities who commit crimes or make mistakes in the past and try to really reflect and have remorse on what had happened and try to come back, make a comeback and do what they've done in the past. But I don't think this should be acceptable.
Exactly. What about you, Walter?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably the biggest news of the year when that happened, right? So in my point of view, I think any celebrity who has conducted this sort of crime, which is very, very serious, should not be on television whatsoever after they do their sentence. So, but that's what happens here in Korea, sadly. A lot of celebrities, a big crime is drink driving. What they do is then take a 2-year hiatus and then come back 2 years later and still continuously make the big dollars, which I think is just completely unfair. But to the extent of this Burning Sun scandal, I think that people like Chung Ju-young shouldn't be there at all or on TV at all.
Even though they served their prison sentence, I do think because it's all about reputation and also the amount of influence you are exerting as a public figure, which we mentioned a few days back, it does really shed light as to whether it's appropriate for them to be back on the screen. And while this issue develops, in the meantime, we're going to switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day now. We're living in times where living just off our salary doesn't seem to be enough. Rising food prices and high inflation almost makes investment seem like a necessity, especially among millennials and Gen Z. My AI voice secretary with more.
Back in April last year, a private academy institution in Korea surveyed 500 millennials and Gen Z. The survey asked what they were most interested in. 9 out of 10 said they were most interested in investment. Another area of interest was real estate. Respondents preferred increasing their wealth over getting a job, electronics, or learning a new language.
As our generation is interested in investment, there's many different ways we try to expand our assets. One popular method that has boomed recently is Bitcoins, especially since the U.S. securities regulator first approved U.S.-listed exchange-traded funds, or ETF, to track Bitcoin. So Walter, why don't you tell us a bit more about this measure and how this would affect our generation's investment patterns from now on?
Exactly. So like you said, the latest trend is Bitcoin ETF, as you mentioned, standing for Exchange Traded Fund. Now, what it basically is an easy and convenient investment where you can sell or buy assets on the stock market, for example, Tesla. From the end of 2023, the price of Bitcoin soared and the coin craze among MZers began to blow up once again. Now, in fact, 62% of virtual currency exchanges are on the MZ generation, and they are the ones who are investing in these coins.
I see. Now, Chi, would you like to add on about the latest Bitcoin craze and how this affected our investment patterns?
Sure. In South Korea, however, the Financial Services Commission has decided not to pursue the proposal of allowing domestic investors to really invest in Bitcoin ETFs listed overseas or launch any sort of domestic ETF. And this is partly because we've been influenced by an incident in the past where we delisted the cryptocurrency called Luna. And this, of course, made the decision, influenced the decision because we had to be more cautious with investing in these sort of cryptocurrencies. And I think many millennials, since they have experienced failure in investing in these cryptocurrencies, I think they will opt for traditional means of investment a lot more rather than something risky like cryptocurrencies.
Exactly, and we're still yet to see whether digital assets are really reliable and credible. That's exactly why the U.S.'s latest measures, like a lot of professionals are looking into this and they're saying, is it really not that risky of an investment pattern, especially since already earlier today we've seen the peak price of Bitcoin fall down from earlier this month to a fifth. So we're seeing a lot of volatility there. But in regards to that, I think it also has to do with how much our generation is gearing attention towards whether it be Bitcoins or any other ways of expanding our assets. And that just shows that our generation is really interested in that because, as we mentioned in the VCR, in times like this, it's really hard just to live off our salary. So could you explain how exactly are more young adults, especially here in Korea, trying to invest?
Yes, so yes, it is very hard to live from paycheck to paycheck, but if we take a look at the screen, I can tell you what most MZers are doing these days. Now, this is obviously the most used savings and investment methods by our generation and the MZ generation. Now, as you can see, with a large portion, installment savings comes in at number one, that's 37.5%. Then we are followed by stocks, virtual assets, and surprising and not surprising at the same time is Korea these days aren't really into their real estate and they haven't been investing in it as much. And this is obviously due to the fact that, you know, the pricing of houses these days and apartments is just almost out of reach for most MZers, I think.
Exactly. I don't think it's the matter of we're not being interested in it or not. I think it's the matter of whether we can afford it, but it is often a very popular investment method. And as you mentioned, these are some trends that our generation is following because we prioritize investment. Are there any other methods these days?
Well, 86% of the younger generation, they believe that they need knowledge in finance to be able to invest better. Although the younger generation, compared to the older generation, have less asset and less income, they do have a very economic mindset and they stay up to date with all the domestic and international trends, which means that they're better and quicker at adapting to new forms of investment. And these include things like investing in plants even, and music copyrights, funding, as well as selling their luxury goods.
So there's so many different types of investment methods out there because our generation seems to be prioritizing that. So I believe that there's going to be a lot of latest trends going on. And I'm curious as to you guys speaking on behalf of millennials and Gen Z out there, have you ever tried out any unique investment methods?
Unfortunately, I haven't. I'm going to have to give you a quick and boring answer, and I do not invest in anything at the moment. However, as I get older and the more people around me I meet and talk to, they are investing into certain areas such as Bitcoin or whatever it may be. And I do understand that it might actually be very helpful for me to start investing, but I'm actually quite scared to invest myself. And I think it's one thing that to do is you have to to follow these trends every day. What's happening in the stocks every day? My family around me invests. I think I'm the only one in my family who doesn't invest, so I'm left in the dark at the moment. But it is something that I am seriously considering these days.
Exactly. You mentioned a good point. I think there's still a lot of millennials, Gen Z, like yourself, who might not be directly investing, given the fact that they want to compile more information, but the interest is still there. It's very visible. What about you, Chi?
Well, I'm currently investing in just stocks, but many millennials and Gen Zers these days, unlike Walter, they're turning to some new means of investing. And because there's uncertainty in the future for them, and because the traditional upward social ladder has disappeared, the only way for them to really earn more asset, earn more money, is to really take a risk in investing in things like cryptocurrency, or even real estate, etc. So instead of really just saving, they're turning to these a lot more high return, risky investment methods.
Exactly. As long as they can expand their assets, I think they would try anything out. And I think a really good point that we mentioned so far is the fact that we're actually really interested in learning more about this because we want to try out investing, whether it's now or in the near future. And we asked our viewers if there's any trending investment methods in their respective country. Here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Let's start with Tasmia. Tasmia said in Bangladesh, the first investment is real estate, as it's a very traditional trend. The second is food and catering. Since we are an overpopulated country, we need to feed our people. Benny said in the Philippines, the investment trends that we have usually are tourism, beauty, and personal care, agriculture, and food and beverages. And the reason is because these sectors can expand in our economy. Leon said Singapore's investment trends are quite diverse. For example, due to rising interest rates and uncertainties in the equity market, many investors are seeking stability and regular income through bonds and other fixed income instruments. I do think that our viewers pointed out a really important point. As much as it's important to personally invest, it's also important to really read all these socio-economic trends out there. And in order for us to do that, we're now going to include an expert who can better guide us on how to invest wisely and really read into the current market. We're now going to include an assistant professor from KDI School of Public Policy Management who can analyze our generation's investment trends. It's Professor Lee Sehyun. Welcome, Professor Lee.
Hi, good morning.
Hello. Professor Lee, I think the current market really affects our generation's investment patterns. So could you first define how the market is like at the moment and then characterize our generation's investment trends as of this moment?
Okay, so I think Gen Zs and millennials are becoming more active in investing, as you already mentioned, and they're familiar with online banking and investment, and they spend a lot more time on finance and trading apps, and they adopt, and then leverage all of these innovations in fintech. And they do seamless cross-border international stock trading and sometimes use fractional trading to buy small shares of expensive stocks like Apple and Tesla. Through the financial services, they also get personalized investment advice on how to save and investment. And they're not afraid of investing in crypto assets like Bitcoin and other, small coins. So all of these factors are driving the younger generation's investment trend, which is a very short term and searching for higher yields.
Well, that's quite interesting. After what happened with the Luna coin, I thought that many of the Koreans would be very, disheartened by investing into cryptocurrency, but it still seems to continue, which is a good thing. But why do you think our generation is prioritizing investment and expanding our assets?
Younger generations have lived through huge market swings recently, like the real estate and tech bubbles and bust and COVID economic turmoil. And we have seen a lot of, fluctuations in the economic variables, let's say. Through this experience and the demographic changes we're watching now, they've recognized that they will not enjoy the high returns their parents actually made before. So they're afraid of losing their opportunity in a way. So, and also the cost of living crisis and the growing inequality between super rich and others, and made younger generations pay more attention to the investments. Also, I think compared to previous generations, there are much more younger people who have been gaining the financial freedom through, their incomes generated from social media and content creation, like YouTube creation. And they made much more purchasing power in the financial market these days. And they influence a lot to, other younger generations, other peers. So that all of these makes younger people try to pay more attention to the investment in general, I think.
I see. Well, last but not least, Professor, do you have any tips or things that we should keep in mind when investing?
Yeah, actually, the classic advice for younger generations still matters. Begin early to enjoy the compound interest. And also, you have to diversify your risk and avoid impulse spending and pay attention to where you allocate your money by budgeting. And also for the current economic situation with sluggish growth and high inflation, it may be helpful to add additional money to personal emergency funds to avoid excess borrowing at a very expensive interest rate if you need money urgently for possibly, higher housing and other cost of living in the near future. That is, in general, my advice at this moment.
Professor Lee, if I may ask one last question. It's so hard to read the market, though, because I'm no expert, and I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z can relate to this. But if you could go back to when we first started investing, what would be your first tip as to how to better read the market? Which news outlets should we be referring to? Are there any concrete advice that we could take into mind?
So actually, I think the financial literacy in general for the younger generation is weaker than the previous generations, because we have a lot of information flowing, from all of the resources like Instagram, and many other, YouTube and many other social media. So it's really hard to, find out which advice is reliable, which is not. So I think you should first learn some of the basics in business or economics so that you can read the macro market first, and then you will have some idea of how the macroeconomic goes in general. And then you can also learn some of the basics in accountings or business administrations so that you can understand how the firm works, so that you can select some of the good stocks for your own investment. So I think in general, we can leverage some of the basic learnings of economics and businesses.
So learn the basics of economics and then start out from something big and then narrow it down. That seems to be concrete advice. Thank you so much, Professor Lee. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, and to keep Professor Lee's words of advice in mind, how are you guys planning to better and safely invest this year? And I know, Walter, you said that you didn't start investment yet, but based on today's episode, will you?
Well, that's interesting. I actually forgot that I do invest.
Oh, really?
So I actually have a savings account that I do move a lot of my savings from bank to bank, depending on their interest rates. And if they have a high interest rate, I definitely try to move it into that area. So there is an investment there as well. But Professor Lee brought up some really interesting things that I also could relate to. A lot of our generation as well these days are they're scared of losing money, so they're spending it straight away in a way. It's sort of an oxymoron sort of situation. They want to, buy the brand new shiny thing and don't worry about, investing for the future. That's something that I think I've done very much in the past, but now, I'm got a family to look after.
Yeah.
But yes, interesting enough, a lot of people also go to YouTube and learn from the social media, which I don't know if is a good idea. I think Professor Lee is right in saying that we should look at accounting, learn business first, and that's something I might invest in as well. But for me personally, I'm going to invest in my own business one day. So that means it's a little bit of a different situation to what we were talking about today. But a lot of my money, hopefully not all, will go into my business to one day help me get further in life.
That's a really great plan. And as you mentioned, I think our generation, though we are very interested in investments, sometimes we don't have the best financial literacy. We just try to get information really quickly, whether it be on social media or asking our friends without doing enough digging. We then invest, and sometimes we have to make the sacrifice because we lose a lot of money. So I think it's really key that we take this as like an academic assignment. We try to read into macroeconomics first and then delve one by one. But Chihi, any personal tips you might have, given that you've told us that you've been investing in stocks and there's so many different methods out there?
That's right.
Any words of advice for our viewers?
Well, I think the effective way to really increase your savings, other than earning more, would be to actually study finance. And the best way to increase your financial literacy is to read economics news, news on the economy. If you keep reading these articles, I'm sure you'll get those eyes to look into the different markets and the different businesses. And also use less. And I think one other way is to really identify and analyze your spending habits and see if there's any room for improvement in them so that you can save more and really reduce unnecessary spending.
Exactly. And I think investment, the reason why it really resonates with our generation is because it brings results for myself. It's for yourself, so it's a good investment, a personal investment that you should make not only for the current situation, but also for the near future. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And Chizihi.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to